What's up, everyone? Welcome to TYT. I'm your host, Anna Kasparian. Man, it is good to be back. It really, really is. This is my home. This is where I love to share the news. This is where I just feel the most comfortable. And I say that as someone that's doing so many other projects, but I gotta say, I really love this show. I love our audience. And most of all, I love my team. All right. We've got a big show ahead for you today. I don't want to waste too much time with housekeeping and teases about what we're going to talk about. But Wosny Lambre will be joining me for the second hour and the bonus episode for our members. So if you are a member, definitely stay tuned for our bonus episode. If you're not, become a member by going to tyt.com/join. Tucker Carlson has dropped the first episode of his 9/11 docuseries, and I gotta say, it did not disappoint. We're gonna kind of go over what the first episode was about, and it really does have to do with these, these clandestine CIA intel operations that the FBI wasn't fully informed about. So we'll get into those details. But before we get to like the nuts and bolts of the show, like the important current events, I do want to address something that happened on Her Take. It's a weekly panel show that I host for Valuetainment. I am the resident, I guess, lefty of that panel. And we've had lots of fiery moments, that's for sure. But something happened that I want to make sure I clarify, because these types of things end up getting spun into things that I've never said, things I've never believed. So without further ado, let's get into it.
Where's your proof that $150 million was offered from Bibi Netanyahu?
No, I'm referring.
Where is the proof?
Please do not get angry.
No, because I didn't want to cover this, and you guys insisted. And I told you, you cover this. I'm gonna rip you apart. Where is the proof?
We're not
that
saying
Bibi
that it
Netanyahu
happened. We're really
offered
not
Charlie
saying that it
$150 million. This is not for me. I'm not interested in this.
Okay,
I love you
know.
guys.
I'm
sorry.
Let's be good. Let's be good about precious Israel. Let the country committing a genocide. Yeah. Well, as you just saw from that video, Jillian Michaels, who co-hosts Her Take along with me, Amy Dangerfield, and Lindy Lee, quit with her and essentially did so while we were live. Now, keep in mind, Jillian Michaels was the lead host of that show, so she abandoned it while we were airing live. And I want to explain exactly what happened from my point of view, while doubling down on what I believe about some of the rumors and some of the theories floating around about Charlie Kirk's assassination and these allegations that Israel, played a role in his assassination. Now, I want to be very clear right off the bat. I do not believe that there is any evidence drawing a direct connection between Charlie Kirk's assassination and Israel. As everyone knows, I am not someone who holds back when it comes to criticizing Israel, but I think the truth matters. And if there's no evidence, I just think it's super irresponsible to, preemptively place blame on Israel for Charlie Kirk's assassination. That's crazy. Now, that is an entirely different story from what I have talked about on this show. And that has to do with what Charlie Kirk was personally experiencing in regard to Zionist pressure in the last few months of his life. Now, what I refer to when I'm referring to that Zionist pressure, I'm specifically talking about the fact that apparently behind the scenes, and Charlie Kirk himself confirmed this in a conversation with Megyn Kelly, he felt that he was being smeared as an anti-Semite, which he clearly wasn't, because of the fact that he included Dave Smith and Tucker Carlson at the America Fest, conference. And during that conference, Dave Smith, debated somebody on Israel, and I thought it was a great debate. I enjoyed it. And then Tucker Carlson, of course, gave that speech in which he, floated the idea that Jeffrey Epstein was a Mossad asset. Okay. So I think that if you're going to be part of a group of people, and as Charlie Kirk very much was, that purports to want to be inclusive of all points of view, debate all points of view, not try to censor people because of wrongthink, then yeah, you should be inclusive of voices like Tucker Carlson's. I mean, he's one of the top conservatives in this country in terms of media. And Dave Smith, who is not as big as Tucker Carlson, but he's been really making a name for himself by debating this very issue. And so I love the fact that he included those voices, but apparently some of the donors behind Turning Point USA did not feel the same. Okay, fair enough. Now, the segment that we were doing, okay, about the conspiracies, yes, did mention the conspiracy about Israel allegedly, having something to do with Charlie Kirk's assassination. Every single person on that panel said that they do not believe it. But that was getting conflated with something else. And the conflation had to do with the pressure that Charlie Kirk was facing. So as this conversation was happening, people are speaking over each other. It's pretty chaotic. And I thought in real time, what was going on was that Jillian was under the impression that we're about to throw Israel under the bus as the assassins. And that she was conflating that with the story that I do believe has credibility, and that's that Charlie Kirk is facing pressure from, Zionist donors. Okay. But then upon reflecting on this Her Take segment, I realized that no, Jillian wanted to not deny that story as well. And I disagree with that wholeheartedly. So she wanted to basically convey that Kirk was still very much supportive of Israel, which is absolutely true. Take a look.
He is saying he's being criticized for giving an audience to people like Dave Smith. He is not saying that he is changing his mind and thinks the Jews are evil.
No, he wasn't changing his mind.
I want to be real clear here.
No, but
because I think this is dangerous, and I want to be deadly accurate if we're gonna have this conversation. So that's what he was talking about. It's about the fact that Dave Smith, he gave him an audience at Turning Point, and he was being criticized for having people who didn't agree, like Tucker, on the stage. He wasn't saying, I have changed my mind here and I'm being attacked.
So basically, he's getting this pressure from donors, which led to that meeting in the Hamptons with Bill Ackman, because Bill Ackman apparently wasn't happy with it either. But you guys also have to understand that there is a trend now with young conservatives who are not supportive of Israel or not as supportive as previous generations.
So at this point, I'm under the assumption that we're all on the same page, because you just heard Jillian Michaels repeat what I believe, right? That Charlie Kirk was facing backlash. He didn't like the backlash. He was public about the fact he didn't like that backlash as he was speaking to Megyn Kelly on her show. Okay, fair enough. Now, at one point, the claim that pro-Israel donors had offered Kirk and Turning Point a $150 million cash infusion as a way of influencing him came up. And, Jillian thinks that the claim is spurious, and I haven't seen hard evidence. For now, there have been rumors about that, but she is right that there isn't hard evidence of it. And she was very stuck on this point. Okay, so let's take a look at that part of the conversation.
Where's your proof that $150 million was offered from Bibi Netanyahu?
No, I'm referring.
Where is the proof?
Please do not get angry.
No, because I didn't want to cover this, and you guys insisted. And I told you cover this. I'm gonna rip you apart. Where is the proof?
We're not
that
saying that
Bibi
it
Netanyahu
happened. We're really
offered
not
Charlie
saying that it
$150 million.
Jillian,
so we're not.
So what we're reporting on is
now
people in the marketplace, what they're saying. This is a discussion that's happening literally everywhere. We would be remiss if we didn't cover it to debunk it.
This conversation.
It's still,
over a week.
It's still pretty prevalent.
Is a week old.
It's still going on, Jillian.
Okay, well, nevertheless, where is the proof that actually happened?
I just said, according to this guy's reporting, he was offered $150 million.
Okay,
that wasn't it also corroborated by Candace?
It was corroborated by Candace, and not only that, by Nick.
And also
because listen, I like Candace. She has people from his own team have said he has not seen her in years.
And yet last year they were on tour together.
Okay, no one has reported that Benjamin Netanyahu personally has offered or had offered Turning Point USA $150 million. There was reporting that pro-Zionist donors offered a cash infusion, and that Charlie Kirk rejected that, along with Benjamin Netanyahu's trip. He offered a trip for Charlie Kirk to visit Israel again. Now, we all know what those trips to Israel are all about. It's basically re-education camp. don't you know better than that? You shouldn't be critical of, I mean, he wasn't even really all that critical of Israel, to be honest with you. He didn't want to invade Iran. I obviously agreed with him on that. But for the most part, I saw him constantly defending Israel. It has now gotten to a point where the ongoing slaughter in Gaza is too difficult to defend. So I think he was starting to find himself in a very uncomfortable position where you have the donors pressuring him to continue defending Israel at any and all costs. But you also have young conservatives who see what's going on, and they're moving further and further away from being as supportive toward Israel as conservatives traditionally have been. Okay, so at this point, honestly, I lost patience. And the reason why I lost patience is because of exactly what you heard in that video. We're having a conversation. We are discussing what various people are saying, what various reports are alleging. You have to get through the presentation of the story and what the various people are saying before we can all weigh in on what we think and what our analysis is. But we never even got there. Okay, Amy is trying to present everything. As she's trying to present everything, she keeps getting interrupted. Jillian already has in her mind what all of us think about all of these issues without ever hearing what we think about any of these issues. And when I heard her look at Lindy, who I have gotten into many arguments, heated arguments with, when she looked at Lindy and said, I told you I didn't want to talk about this, and if you did talk about it, I was going to rip you apart. That kind of threat is unacceptable. It just is. I have had all sorts of moments on that show because of the fact that I have many disagreements. The whole point of that panel is to have various perspectives represented. We get into debates all the time. There have been moments where I have felt disrespected, not by Jillian, to be fair. And there have been moments where it's been, 3 versus 1, or, in the case of Adam Sosnick joining us, it was, basically 3 versus 1 because Amy wasn't really attacking me as we were debating Israel. But I never threatened anybody, and I never told anyone that I'm going to rip them apart. So at this point, I lose my patience, and I want to clear the air because I'm still at this moment under the impression that Jillian is conflating 2 different stories, okay? The conspiracy about Israel allegedly assassinating Charlie Kirk, which is ridiculous. And then the other story about the pressure that Charlie Kirk was facing. So I attempted to clear the air. Get a load of this.
There are 2 things being conflated right now. There are conspiracy theorists who think Israel killed Charlie Kirk. They have yet to provide a shred of evidence proving that. Done. End of story.
We're not talking about that.
I am talking about something entirely
different.
talking
about that.
No, we're not. Hold on.
Oh,
Let me finish my thought. Okay, the real issue here is that before most people even knew that Charlie Kirk was dead, you have Netanyahu giving multiple interviews talking about how, using the moment for his own political purposes, like the
That's
fool that he is.
Totally
Let me finish my point.
Him killing Charlie Kirk.
Did I not just
said that.
I literally
so
just
now we're just gonna make
let me finish my point, Jillian, because none of us can finish the damn point without someone else jumping down your throat. I don't think that Israel killed him because there's no evidence of that. But I had a problem with Netanyahu exploiting an assassination in this country for his own political means and purposes and lying about the nature of his relationship with Charlie Kirk.
I cleared the air. Very specific. I repeated twice in the video you just saw that I don't think Israel is behind Charlie Kirk's assassination. Okay, but things still got out of control after that point. And it's just, I don't understand it. Well, actually now, thinking about this in retrospect, I do understand it. So at this point, pretty, in my opinion, I just think what Netanyahu did, like before most people even realized that Charlie Kirk was already pronounced dead. Like the same minute that Trump announced that Charlie Kirk had passed, you have Netanyahu doing some of the most detestable garbage commentary about who he believes killed Charlie Kirk. Okay, he goes on Fox News. I want you to take a look at that video. This is what I was referring to.
He certainly didn't invite the violence, the horrible violence that tried to silence him. And this is a worldwide problem. The people on the on the extremes, the Islamists, the radical Islamists, and their union with the ultra progressives, they often speak about human rights, they speak about free speech, but they use violence to try to take down their enemies, whether it's President Trump, who's been almost assassinated twice, or they try to kill me here too.
So let me understand something. It is so below the belt and so unacceptable to prematurely blame Israel for an assassination when there's no evidence. And I agree with that take. How is it okay for the prime minister? This isn't just some random person online. This isn't some rando conspiracy theorist on X. This is the prime minister of Israel exploiting a tragic moment in American history for his own political purposes to spread hate and propaganda about Muslims. Because God forbid the leader of Israel ever miss an opportunity to exploit a tragedy in the United States for his own purposes, as he did in the aftermath of 9/11, by the way. This is who Netanyahu is. I am never, ever going to be silenced by anyone in calling out how detestable and disgusting that was. Now, if Jillian disagrees with me on that, she could have had a conversation about it, but that's not what happened. This is what happened.
Because Charlie Kirk didn't like Netanyahu, just like any warm-blooded American shouldn't. Netanyahu is a bad guy. And he wanted to make it seem like, no, we were all great, we were good, we had a great relationship. Little did we know behind the scenes, there was a lot of pressure towards
ends up being about how do we bash Israel. This is not for me. I'm not interested in this.
Okay,
I love you guys.
I'm
sorry.
Let's be good. Let's be good about precious Israel. Let the country committing a genocide. Yeah. Okay.
Zero. I think you guys are great. I fundamentally disagree with you about like every show doing this. I'm sorry.
Cool. So can we continue the conversation?
Yeah, let's.
Okay.
You wanted to do it anyway.
Finish the last topic.
All right.
All right.
Wow, okay guys, so again, to clarify, I don't think Israel did it.
I'm sorry, it is not some angelic country, it's a foreign country, and we have the right to be as critical of a foreign country as we want. We have the right to be as critical of our own country as we want.
That's my take. And upon reflecting on that moment and the fact that the actual lead host of the show quit the show live on air because she's so offended that we're critical of Israel, that was not only unprofessional, it was disrespectful to everyone that was involved in producing the show, working on the show. I traveled from Los Angeles to Florida to host the show. That was disrespectful beyond words, unprofessional beyond words, period. That was basically taking a big crap on all of us live on air because she allegedly doesn't like that we're too critical of Israel. Let me just say something. I will be as critical of Israel or any country as I want. We have a production meeting prior to every taping, every live show. She's part of those production meetings where we decide what the stories are. I take detailed notes to make sure that we're all on the same page. We all know what we're going to discuss. At no point during that production meeting did she push back on the idea of discussing this particular topic. The day before the show, as she typically likes to do, she tried to change the entire rundown, or at least add some weird Islamophobic story about how like, oh, there's a Muslim person or a Muslim leader in Texas or something who is going to Muslim-owned grocery stores and calling them out for their hypocrisy because they're selling pork items. I don't care. I mean, you have conservatives protesting abortion in front of abortion clinics. This is America, wakey, wakey. This is what religious liberty is. Religious people get to protest, things that they don't agree with as it pertains to their religious doctrine. But some weird hyper-local story that's specifically meant to demonize Muslims, no, she wanted to do a quick rapid fire round where we talk about those stories without any debate. And I said, no, that's a story that's worthy of debate. So we didn't add it, literally a day before our show. And what she said there, it was just so clear. It wasn't about reporting what was correct, what was incorrect, what had actual evidence behind it, what didn't have evidence behind it. She just didn't like that we were being too critical of Israel. A few weeks ago, she was trying to encourage me to sign on to a debate on the show with Coleman Hughes, who had just put out a piece denying that there's mass starvation in Gaza. Okay. When you walk off the show because your feelings are hurt and you're the main host of the show, that demonstrates a level of disregard and unprofessionalism that I'm not gonna stay silent about. And to twist our words and make it appear as though we're trying to draw a connection between Charlie Kirk's assassination and Israel is ridiculous, because literally no one did that. And today, there's even more evidence backing up what I believe is credible, that Charlie Kirk was in fact dealing with a lot of backlash because he's being inclusive of voices who are critical of Israel. And he felt afraid to be critical of Israel himself, as you're about to hear in this next clip. So today, Kirk's producer, Andrew Colvett, clarified that, yeah, Charlie Kirk was getting backlash and he was pretty irritated by it.
Charlie's position on Israel was very clear. I like them more than I like Hamas. I just wish I was free to criticize Israel and not be labeled an anti-Semite, because I can criticize my own government and not be called anti-American.
Right.
But why do I have more freedom to do, that and not criticize, a foreign government? And he was really upset that there was this sort of clampdown on the freedom of expression, the freedom of ideas, free speech when it came to a foreign government. And I will say this, he felt like he had earned the right as a friend of the Jewish people over the years and all of the things that he had done. He felt like his bona fides in that respect were unassailable, and that he should have the freedom to say, hey, it's time to end the war. Hey, it's time to stop the killing. But, when you, with Tucker, for example, yeah, I mean, we took some pushback, we lost some donors. And what's interesting is it wasn't necessarily Jewish donors.
Yeah, because Zionists include evangelicals. This is not about Jews, as I've said a billion times before. There is also an intentional conflation of Israel and Jewish people in general. And that's done intentionally to smear anyone who dares to be critical of Israel as an anti-Semite. If you are critical of a government, it doesn't mean that you hate the people of that country. If you are critical of a government that refers to Israel as a Jewish state, it doesn't mean that you are anti-Semitic or hate Jewish people. It means that you have a problem with the conduct of that government. And no one's ever, ever, ever gonna silence me about that, ever, period. I'm gonna tell the truth, even if it comes at a significant cost to my career, Jillian, as you voiced some concern about. Finally, one more point that I want to bring up. Today it was reported that, and this is by Max Blumenthal, by the way, he's naming names. Ultra-Zionist billionaire Robert Shillman, I kid you not, that is his name, was one of Charlie Kirk's most committed donors. But as Kirk fell under attack for his increasingly critical Israel views during his final weeks, sources say Shillman ended funding for Turning Point USA. This is a legitimate story that has legitimate receipts. Names have been named, and it is entirely separate from conspiracy theories involving Israel allegedly assassinating Charlie Kirk, which again is spurious and does not have any evidence to back it up. So if anyone dares to say that I believe in that conspiracy theory, if anyone dares to smear me, I want to be very clear right now in stating what I actually believe. And I don't want anyone to fall for what I believe is an intentional conflation of a ridiculous conspiracy theory with something that actually has some credibility behind it. That's it. All right, we gotta take a break. When we come back, we'll get to the news. We'll get to the really important matters of the day, including Trump basically listing people he doesn't like as terrorists in the country. We'll be right back. What's up, everyone? Welcome back to our social break. Spider-Man Dragon says, ooh, Spider-Man and a dragon says, Anna, are we shocked Trump licked Bibi's boots? Surprised they didn't have public sex. I really hope they don't. Okay, so Little Mac McGee says, Anna, it is great to have you back. Little Mac McGee, I just want to let you know, I did see your tweets. Look, I largely agree with you. I'm kind of struggling to decide what the best approach is when it comes to talking about Charlie Kirk's past. Because as I've said multiple times before, there's so many things that he has said in the past that I disagreed with that we covered on this show. But at the same time, I know that there are a lot of people hurting, and immediately getting into a discussion about all the things that were wrong with Charlie Kirk doesn't feel like the right moment. You get what I'm saying? I'll make the statement that he said a lot of things that I found wrong. In some cases, yes, also hateful. But anyway, I just want to let you know that I see you, and thank you for the warm welcome back to the show. Jenks left tricep of fury says, Anna, that's the reaction I get talking facts to any MAGA person. They can't handle the truth. You know, I've actually had a different experience with that. Like, I've had many conversations, a lot of them off camera, to be honest with you, where I try to come at it from a place of understanding instead of a accusatory way. And we tend to find some common ground that way, but I'll also admit, yeah, some people get super sensitive, and usually when they have a difficult time articulating their rebuttal, you know, they'll just kind of check out entirely. So I hear what you're saying on that. Next TYT reporter says, if you don't like people criticizing Israel, then leave this country. There are plenty of other countries who will police speech and tell their citizens what to say. Not in America. That will never happen. I wholeheartedly agree. On that same show, we have been critical of China. Lindy Lee is Chinese. She's been super critical of China. There was never any accusation that we hate Chinese people. Amy Dangerfield is Australian. She has been very critical of Australia. She has brought up topics in which Australia was, engaging in too much surveillance of their people. No one's under the impression that anyone on that panel hates Australians. Israel is not an untouchable government. If they are engaging in bad acts, we as Americans who provide welfare to that country, especially, have the right to air our grievances with their conduct. I'm just so sick of this, honestly. I'm so sick of it. And we can't allow people to intimidate us from speaking our minds. This is America, period. All right, just a few more comments from our super chatters. We've got Lane Hamilton who says, Anna, it was just a heated debate. They get out of hand sometimes. I worry for you on the Israel thing. It's like me with Putin, I go off sometimes. I mean, if you were to say you worry about people trying to destroy my family or destroy my career, I would agree with you because that has already happened. And maybe that's why I'm so irritated with how that debate went down, because I felt like Jillian had no interest in listening to what any of us had to say. And look, I have literally had a tampon thrown at me by Adam Sosnick in the middle of a debate about Israel. You want to know what I did? I stayed. I didn't get triggered by that stupid stunt. And I continued engaging in dialogue and debate. I didn't leave. And the reason why I didn't leave is because, number one, I respect myself. Number two, I respect the people that I have worked hard to produce that show with. I respect my co-hosts, regardless of how much we might disagree on the topic at hand. It's that simple. It's that simple. We've got Harkin who says, Bibi, we didn't murder Charlie, just 50,000 plus Gazan children. Well, exactly. All right. Well, let's move on to some other news. I want to talk a little bit about what Trump is doing in regard to domestic terrorism in America, which I do think you can make a case that there are potential domestic terrorists in the country. It's just that his focus is very telling.
Antifa is going to be designated a domestic terrorist organization. This is something the president campaigned on because we have seen a rise in violence perpetuated by Antifa radical people across this country who subscribe to this group. And unfortunately, it's gone widely uncovered by many in the legacy media. It also went completely ignored by the previous administration, not anymore.
President Donald Trump has officially signed an executive order designating Antifa as a terrorist organization, despite the fact that it's not actually an organization at all. There's no leader, there's no website you can hit up to find someone to interview. It's really a loose collective of people who, I will admit, in some cases have engaged in acts that I don't think are legal. When you meet anyone with any type of physical assault, it's wrong. And I do condemn it. But labeling Antifa as a domestic terror organization is dangerous for a number of different reasons. Because my read of this is that it's not a way of holding people who engage in physical political violence to account. I see this as a way of Trump attempting to intimidate his opponents, protesters. So let me make that case. So his administration is threatening to target all liberal protesters and donors to groups critical of him. So I guess that's now considered domestic terrorism under the president of the United States. This is supposed to be the leader of the free world. But he can't handle backlash. He can't handle protests against him, even peaceful protests. So he's going to sign a ridiculous executive order to, number one, intimidate people, but number two, potentially use force against his political opponents. And I'm not even talking about politicians. I'm talking about ordinary American people who disagree with his policies. And to be sure, there have been some pretty disgusting acts carried out by the Trump administration. There was a story just today about ICE detaining an autistic child and essentially holding this child hostage. I mean, it's just like some of the most disgusting stuff I've seen when it comes to the behavior of these ICE agents. You know, you have an ICE agent that's in plain clothes, masked up. How are you supposed to know that's law enforcement? How are you supposed to know that's an ICE agent? If I'm with a family member and that family member gets snatched up by some random plainclothes individual with a mask on, I'm gonna assume that it is a criminal kidnapping my family member. So anyway, just giving you an example of something that he has done that I've disagreed with. So this kind of behavior has led to protests, and Trump doesn't like that. So this does come in the wake of Charlie Kirk's assassination, which Trump and the Republicans were quick to blame on Antifa, despite the fact that there's no evidence that Antifa is behind it. It's as ridiculous as the claim that Israel was behind Charlie Kirk's assassination. So in fact, NBC News reported over the weekend that the federal investigation into Kirk's assassination has yet to find a link between the alleged shooter, 22-year-old Tyler Robinson, and left-wing groups on which President Donald Trump and his administration have pledged to crack down on after the killing. Three sources familiar with the probe told NBC News. Now, I think it's entirely possible that Tyler Robinson was a left-winger. You know, his family allegedly said that he had become more left-wing in his politics. But based on what we've learned about Tyler Robinson, it appears that what motivated the disgusting political assassination that he engaged in was the fact that he had a partner who was transgender and he hated what Charlie Kirk had to say about transgender people. Okay, so that is politically motivated. But to tie him to Antifa makes no sense because there's no evidence of that. So one person familiar with the federal investigation said that every indication so far is that this was one guy who did one really bad thing because he found Kirk's ideology personally offensive. Nonetheless, President Trump is using Kirk's horrific murder for political purposes and is now vowing to target not only Antifa, but other groups that he considers left-wing extremists as well. Take a look.
What comes next after designating Antifa? We're going to designate too, but we're going to look at the people that funded Antifa, see who they are, where they came from, and why they did.
Okay. So this really does remind me of the excesses we saw from the federal government in the aftermath of 9/11. 9/11, obviously the worst terrorist attack on US soil. Thousands of innocent Americans died as a result of Al-Qaeda's attack. And people are scared. And when people are scared, when people are angry, that's the perfect opportunity for, the federal government and authoritarian figures within the federal government with authoritarian tendencies to take full advantage. And that's what I believe Trump is doing here. Now, anyone who is planning violence, any group, any extremist group in the US that's organized and they're planning on carrying out acts of violence, absolutely, I think the federal government should go after them, regardless of their political ideology. I mean that. But that's not what's happening here. The executive order he signed threatens investigatory and prosecutorial action against those who financially support Antifa. Again, Antifa is a loose collective. It's not an organization. Like, even if you wanted to donate to Antifa, I don't even know how you would do that. But okay, as we explained on the show once before, there are some serious issues with this executive order. For one, anti-fascism is a broad political ideology, not a specific group or organization. And Antifa doesn't have a leader, a roster of known members, or a centralized structure at all, which makes this executive order even more dangerous. Now, some might say, well, if it's not an organization, then we have nothing to worry about. This executive order is null and void, but that's not the case. So here's Mark Bray, author of the book Antifa, the Anti-Fascist Handbook, explaining.
The kind of like street level, direct action focused, militant anti-fascism of the post-war period is often referred to as Antifa. And it's kind of this nexus of radical left politics and direct action tactics. And it's kind of a way of doing politics. It's a leftist radical milieu. It's not one specific group. I sometimes compare it to feminism, right? Feminism is not a group, but there are feminist groups. Antifa is not a group, but there are Antifa groups.
Okay, so we fully understand what Antifa is. Now, when it's not a centralized group, right, or they don't have like a centralized power structure, well, then it's easier to just label anyone you don't like as Antifa. And that's what I'm concerned about here, that this is going to be an avenue in which the federal government intimidates and prosecutes people who engage in political action, peaceful. I want to be specific. I want to make that distinction, because if it's violent, obviously that is not protected by law. But I'm worried that peaceful protesters are going to be targeted as a result of this executive order. And they're going to be targeted by the president just slapping the label of domestic terrorist onto them and then using lawfare to go after them. And here's the second issue. Trump's order said that he was declaring Antifa a domestic terrorist organization, a designation that does not actually exist under US law. Federal law empowers the government to label overseas groups foreign terrorist organizations, a status that allows the US to freeze their assets and make it a crime to provide material support to them. So is this, look, even though there's nothing under US law that would allow the president to declare Antifa a terrorist organization, a domestic terrorist organization, do you think that's gonna stop him? Is it possible that some of the protesters that the federal government doesn't like could have their assets freezed? So these are the things that we need to consider and think about. And by the way, if this were Biden, I would be equally as disgusted. Because I remember when, the shutdowns had happened during COVID. And there were plenty of conservative protesters who were peacefully protesting. And I did not think the federal government should have gone after them in any way, shape, or form. Now, if they engaged in violence, that's something entirely different. But they had the right to protest the shutdowns, especially because the shutdowns did deprive Americans of their livelihoods in many cases. And also, on top of that, it is especially challenging for families with children. When schools were shut down, they still had to work from home, but they had a difficult time ensuring that their kids were getting the proper remote learning that they needed to continue their schooling. It was a difficult time. So I had no problem with people protesting the shutdowns. And those people were predominantly right wing. Now, there's no equivalent domestic terrorism law It's been debated for years whether or not there should be a domestic terror law, but so far it hasn't come to fruition because of concerns that it would infringe on Americans' First Amendment rights. And those are legitimate concerns. So Trump's order lacks actual teeth that would give the federal government more power, although he would challenge that in the court system. And in some of these federal court rulings, they have sided with Trump. I mean, I think it was the Supreme Court just ruled that Trump has the right to fire, FTC members that he doesn't like, essentially overturning 90 years of precedent in this country. So who knows how this would play out if Trump challenged it in the courts. The Antifa order directs agencies to investigate, disrupt, and dismantle any and all illegal operations by the movement, meaning Antifa, something they already have the authority to do. But the impotency of this specific order does not mean that we shouldn't be concerned about Trump's decision. We should be concerned about this executive order. So as he himself admitted, I mean, he says it out loud, it's part of a broader crackdown on liberals, liberal groups. So last week, 2 senior administration officials said that cabinet secretaries and federal department heads were working to identify organizations that funded or supported violence against conservatives. One tactic has been to target the tax-exempt status of nonprofits. I actually don't have a problem with that, to be honest with you. I think nonprofits should be investigated far more than they have been, not just because of funding of violence. I think a lot of these nonprofits actually operate as lobbying groups, and they get to operate with dark money funding. And we have no idea about the influences in our political system or the influences that essentially lead our politicians to make certain decisions that they make. But that's a different story entirely. But which one is it here? So is it groups that fund violence or groups that are simply critical of Donald Trump? Kind of unclear here. But honestly, when it comes to Trump and his past behavior, it really does sound like the latter. And so you either believe in our Constitution and you believe in protecting everyone's right to peacefully assemble and to protest our government, or you don't. And if you don't believe in that, then you don't believe in our Constitution, you don't believe in what this country stands for. So I guess we're gonna have to wait and see how this really plays out. But it is amazing to me how the most leaders, and this isn't just about America, leaders worldwide who tend to have authoritarian tendencies, the real strong men, tend to have the thinnest skin, don't they? They can't wait for an opportunity to infringe on people's freedom of speech or any freedoms that they may have. So that's what we're dealing with right now. We'll see how this plays out. But in my opinion, this is not looking good. And you shouldn't allow tragic events in this country to be exploited by any politicians, any political leaders for their own agenda and political means. And that's what's happening right now. If someone who is, considered an Antifa person engages in violence, arrest them, prosecute them, bring them to justice. But to do this like broad, generalized, executive order, in my opinion, that's targeting people who disagree with your politics, I find that so pathetic and unconstitutional. All right, we got to take a break. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit about Tucker Carlson's 9/11 special. In our Twitch community, we have Darth Hefe who says, this administration is going to waste millions of dollars chasing the ghosts of Antifa. That would be like the best case scenario. Okay, the worst case scenario is that people are gonna have their rights violated because Trump doesn't like their speech. That's what I'm most concerned about. Korean New Dealer Dragon says, this is the first time I've heard of her take. Wish I would have known about it sooner. So I'm really bad at promoting the stuff I do. I'm getting a little bit better at it, but yeah, I mean, I wasn't supposed to be one of the permanent hosts. I actually filled in last minute when one of who was supposed to be a permanent host dropped out last minute over a family emergency. And then I kind of saw it as an opportunity to speak to a different audience who, of course, are, conservative leaning. And I like doing that because I feel that it's given me an opportunity to persuade some people. And some people have been persuaded, not necessarily to switch to the other side or anything like that, but to at least understand from an honest perspective, like what the left actually thinks on some of these issues. Anyway, so definitely check it out. It's called Her Take. Just Google it or look it up on YouTube and you'll find it. Let's go to Make It Make Sense. No website or a lack of a leader you know of doesn't mean they are not a group. Why does a non-group have a handbook? They have a handbook. They are not a group. If they are not a group, how do you explain them being clearly well organized? What we mean when we say, I don't think they're well organized at all. I think like there are a group of people on a case-by-case basis, local area, from one local area to another. They want to protest. And honestly, I'm not gonna lie, there are definitely members of Antifa that get involved in all sorts of behavior that I loathe. And when they destroy businesses, light things on fire, meet people they disagree with violence, yeah, they should be prosecuted. But my point is, we already have laws for that. Labeling liberals as domestic terrorists is a dangerous precedent. And I'm gonna assume that you're probably conservative. How would you feel if Donald Trump, if Joe Biden had labeled, I don't know, followers of Turning Point USA, which actually is an organization, domestic terrorists? I'd be livid about that. Now, if members of Turning Point USA engaged in political violence, those specific members should be brought to justice. But I would not want to make a generalized domestic terror or terrorist, accusation against an entire group of people, the vast majority of which have never engaged in any violence at all. You get what I'm saying? All right, let's go. All right, let's get to our final story of the first hour before Waj joins us. And this has to do with Tucker Carlson's docuseries on 9/11. Now, I'm gonna admit that for the longest time, when people would say, oh, 9/11 was an inside job, I'd like roll my eyes. Like, what the hell does that even mean? And I don't think that our government orchestrated 9/11. I don't think that they did something or planned to slaughter 3,000 American citizens on September 11th, 2001, okay? But I did learn some really interesting things from this first episode, and it mainly had to do with a CIA intelligence gathering operation that was not communicated with other intelligence organizations, and things got super weird. And I think a lot of people don't know about these details. I didn't know about these details. So I think it is important to know about it. And I encourage you to watch the entire episode. It came out today. We're not going to be able to get into every minor detail that was covered, but there's documentation provided. There's interviews with former FBI agents and CIA agents involved. So definitely watch the full thing. But I'm going to do my best to summarize this because I think it's worth knowing about. So let's get into it.
Anyone who doubts the official narrative is cast as a kook, a criminal, a fringe conspiracy theorist, and punished. They've been blacklisted and censored and banned. Even as the leaders who failed to protect our country on 9/11 use these attacks as a pretense to expand their own powers and permanently transform the United States. Over the course of this investigation, we made numerous findings that shocked us, not least of which the apparent role that former CIA Director John Brennan played in helping bring the 9/11 hijackers to the United States, and the remarkable lengths the CIA went to protect the 9/11 hijackers from the FBI.
You had a duty to protect Americans, and you failed because of your fantastical delusion that you could recruit somebody inside the cell.
Tucker Carlson has published the first episode of his 9/11 docuseries, and it is definitely worth watching. Now, the first episode has to do with the CIA's intelligence gathering operation, the lack of communication with the FBI in regard to this operation, and the fact that there were literally 9/11 hijackers in the country that the CIA knew about, and in fact facilitated the travel to the United States. So I didn't know about that until watching this first episode. And I think it was informative. It was backed up by documentation that was provided by Tucker Carlson. Definitely watch it for yourself. I'm going to summarize it here though. Now, according to a description of the episode, rather than inform the FBI, the CIA tried to recruit 2 of the hijackers for a false flag operation, which quickly spiraled out of control. So that's in the description of the YouTube video. So that's a pretty bold claim. We have to admit it's a bold claim, and I was skeptical of it before watching the episode. But he interviewed someone by the name of Mark Rossini, okay? And Mark Rossini, everything he had to say had corroborating documentation that was shared in the episode, and that changed my mind. So before we get into the details, a little more about who Mark Rossini is. So he was an FBI agent from January 1999 to May of 2003. And he worked as the FBI's New York Joint Terrorism Task Force representative at the Alex Station at CIA headquarters. Now, the Alex Station was very specific. It was known as the Bin Laden unit, okay? So the Bin Laden issue station was like a dedicated unit within the CIA that operated from 1996 to 2005. And its sole role, its sole purpose was to track and monitor Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda, the perpetrators of 9/11. Now, Rossini claims that the FBI did not know that the CIA was allegedly recruiting 9/11 hijackers as informants so they could learn more about Al-Qaeda. And they even approved visas that essentially allowed for these hijackers to travel to the United States, okay? So let's talk a little bit more about this CIA operation, a little background on it. Beginning in 1996, the CIA and NSA had been spying on Al-Qaeda through something known as the Hada home in Sana'a, Yemen. So the Hada home is a really important thing to keep in mind here. The FBI nor Mark Rossini were informed about the communications hub for Al-Qaeda that the CIA had discovered and was spying in on. So the Hada home is where they would gather Al-Qaeda terrorists or affiliates of Al-Qaeda. They'd gather there, and the CIA knew about it, and so they were spying in on the Hada home. Okay, so the Hada home was also the physical home of the father-in-law to Khalid al-Mihdhar, who was one of the 9/11 hijackers. Now, at this time, okay, before 9/11 happened, obviously, there was this summit that was to take place. While spying in on the Hada home, the CIA and the NSA learned about a summit that Al-Qaeda affiliated terrorists were planning to have in Malaysia. So Kuala Lumpur is where they were gonna have this summit. Now, one of the 9/11 hijackers, Khalid al-Mihdhar, basically planned to attend by flying from Yemen to Dubai to Malaysia. Malaysia, again, is where they're gonna have the summit. And at this point, the CIA basically intercepts al-Mihdhar once he arrives in Dubai, and they collect a valuable piece of evidence through a search of his hotel room. You're about to hear more about that piece of evidence through Mark Rossini. He's about to explain what that was.
They arranged to search his room and go in. And when they go in, his passport is there, and they take pictures of it and photocopy it. And they send back the imagery. And lo and behold, in his passport is a visa to go to the United States of America, issued out of the American consulate in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia.
According to one recently released court filings, quote, the visas were issued to facilitate an operation run by the Saudis and the CIA spying operation. The station chief in Riyadh at the time was future CIA Director John Brennan. The CIA continued tracking al-Midhar to Kuala Lumpur, where he met up with other Al-Qaeda associates, including Nawaf al-Hazmi, a second future 9/11 hijacker.
So get a load of this. The 9/11 hijackers, there's two of them, were able to get visas from the United States approved by the US consulate in Saudi Arabia. And that's the consulate that was run by John Brennan. So that is an important piece of information that I had heard rumors about it. I hadn't seen anyone provide any hard evidence of it, so I didn't believe it. But the documentation clearly, lays it out. You have Mark Rossini clearly laying it out. And so the way that these hijackers were able to come to the United States legally was through a visa that was provided by the US consulate in Saudi Arabia, in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. Okay. So here we learned that 9/11 hijacker al-Midhar's passport has a visa to come to the US and that it was issued by that US consulate. Then the CIA headquarters in Kuala Lumpur spied in on the Malaysia summit, where you have these Al-Qaeda affiliated terrorists attending, and reported back to the Alex station in the United States, where Mark Rossini was operating out of. Now, Rossini's FBI colleague, a guy by the name of Doug Miller, approaches him about the CIA cable, because they received that cable from the CIA. That's good. You want that to happen. And tells Rossini that they need to inform the FBI bureau about it, right? They need to let the FBI bureau know that this US Saudi intelligence operation is taking place. Rossini agrees. How could he not? Now, Doug Miller writes what's known as a CIR. That's a Central Intelligence Report. And Rossini approves it. And he's ready to send it over. It goes to the desk of CIA analyst Michael Ann Casey. And here's what happens next, according to Rossini.
And it sits in her queue, her electronic queue, and it doesn't move for like a day or two. It should move in hours. I'll never forget, like it was yesterday. Never forget. I standing over her, and I said, hey, Doug's CIR. She got to go to the FBI. He said, no, it's not. I said, well, why not? She said, because it's not an FBI matter. It's not FBI matter. She said, it's a CIA matter. And when and if we want the FBI to know, we will tell them. And you are not to say anything. I said, but they got a visa to come to the US. She said, no, we're handling it. And when we want to tell the FBI, we will. Now, in my naivete, I believed her. And I have to live with that every day of my life, that I believed her.
I can't imagine living with that kind of guilt, but clearly Rossini feels a lot of guilt over the fact that he followed orders and did what the CIA told him to do. So the CIA blocked the FBI detail at Alex Station, Rossini, from informing the FBI bureau, which is pretty insane, but okay. Then two of the 9/11 hijackers make their way to the United States. Take a look.
On January 8th, 2000, CIA surveillance teams reported that al-Midhar had boarded a flight to Bangkok, Thailand. He was accompanied by a man they identified as al-Hazmi. According to the official account, this is where the trail went cold. The CIA placed their names on a watch list and asked that Thai authorities track their movements. 3 months later, the Thai government reported back. Al-Hazmi had boarded a United Airlines flight to Los Angeles. Al-Midhar was with him. The two hijackers had arrived in the United States.
You have the CIA then following one man and then two men all over the planet, and then eventually even to America, right? Landing in Los Angeles, California, and you don't tell the FBI.
Guys, that's insane. That really is insane. Because think about it, the FBI investigates issues within the borders of the United States. The FBI should know about it. So why the hell would the CIA try to block the FBI bureau from learning about this CIA operation, learning about the fact that Al-Qaeda terrorists were being allowed into the United States, okay? Wouldn't it be helpful considering that Al-Qaeda operatives would be here on domestic soil and the FBI is tasked with investigating and spying on potential terrorists and criminals within US borders? Like, it doesn't make any sense to me. Well, you're about to hear from former White House counterterrorism czar Richard Clarke on what he was told in a newly released document. Take a look.
According to a recently released court filing, former White House counterterrorism czar Richard Clarke told government investigators that the, quote, CIA was running a false flag operation to recruit the hijackers.
When Cofer Black became the head of the counterterrorism center at CIA, he was aghast that they had no sources in Al-Qaeda.
After Clarke made that claim publicly, he received an angry call from former director of the CIA, George Tenet, who did not deny the allegations made by Mr. Clarke, end quote. But when we reached out to Tenet, his spokesperson denied that the CIA was recruiting hijackers, calling it false rumors and saying, quote, that's categorically not true. He also recalled that the executive director of the 9/11 Commission, Philip Zelikow, blocked the commission's investigation into the matter at the behest of Condoleezza Rice.
Okay, that's amazing. So you have George Tenet throwing Condoleezza Rice under the bus. But to be sure, the 9/11 Commission's report does not include anything about this clandestine CIA intelligence gathering operation. So again, to recap, the CIA director, George Tenet, excoriated Clarke, that's the counterterrorism czar, for disclosing what he was told about the CIA intelligence gathering operation, but he did not deny it in the email that he sent to Clarke. This would be something that the 9/11 Commission would want to investigate, right? But the commission's director, Philip Zelikow, blocked the investigation into this, according to Tenet, at the behest of then Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice. So as a result, the official 9/11 report from the 9/11 Commission does not even mention the CIA's plan to recruit the hijackers as CIA informants into Al-Qaeda. So we don't even know who, so we don't even know who that person is, by the way. Like, okay, so the CIA blocked the commission from investigating the CIA operative who was attempting to recruit the hijackers. We don't know who that CIA operative is because in all the documentation, that person is simply referred to as VVV. So that person's name is redacted. And one of the arguments that Tucker Carlson makes is we should have some transparency and we should know more details about who the CIA operative was because this seems like a pretty big deal. And we just, at this moment, don't know. The commission's investigators also did not ask CIA Director George Tenet about the Al-Qaeda summit in Malaysia or why the CIA blocked the FBI from being warned about what they were doing about this whole operation, the fact that there were 2 Al-Qaeda terrorists in the United States with the CIA's help and acknowledgement. So hijackers in the US, let's talk about them a little more. So while in the US, the 9/11 hijackers, that's Al-Hazmi and Al-Midar, lived in plain sight, as Tucker Carlson says in this episode, because they didn't hide their real names. They were living out in the open using their actual names. They were even listed in the San Diego phone book. They lived in San Diego for more than a year before the 9/11 attacks even happened. Also, when they arrived to the US, they met up with a Saudi man by the name of Omar al-Bayoumi at a cafe in Los Angeles. So the CIA was using al-Bayoumi to spy for them and gather intelligence on the hijackers because again, at the time, the CIA was not allowed to engage in domestic spying. So they essentially used this Saudi as their proxy to do the spying for them. And here's a little more about this Omar al-Bayoumi guy.
Bayoumi's notebook, which was uncovered when British law enforcement raided his home in the UK, contained a drawing of an airplane and mathematical calculations related to flying it. The 9/11 Commission investigators never saw this, At the time, al-Bayoumi had a no-show job at a Saudi aviation contractor called Avco. The company's employees say he was one of roughly 50 ghost employees working there at the time, taking the paycheck but never coming to work. According to declassified government documents, an investigator from the 9/11 Commission said al-Bayoumi was receiving substantial sums of money from the Saudi embassy in Washington prior to the 9/11 attacks, that the money was being funneled from accounts at Riggs Bank in Georgetown belonging to Haifa bin Faisal, the wife of the Saudi ambassador to the United States. By using the Saudis as a proxy to recruit the 9/11 hijackers, the CIA gave itself cover. If things went wrong, they could push a narrative that blamed the Saudi government for the attacks, which is what they did.
Now, in addition to that, al-Bayoumi convinced the hijackers to move to San Diego. He co-signed on a lease to an apartment for them. He even paid their first month's rent and security deposit. He got them bank accounts, driver's licenses, and introduced them to other radical Muslims in the area, including Anwar al-Awlaki, who later was assassinated in a drone strike by the Obama administration, even though he was a US citizen and had the right to due process, but nonetheless, he was killed. Just really interesting stuff. So at one point, al-Madar was able to exit and re-enter the United States because he was issued a multi-visit visa by the US consulate. So he traveled to Yemen to see the birth of his daughter, I believe. Birth of a child, I can't remember if it was a daughter or not, but nonetheless, just a few days before he re-entered the United States though, and he re-entered through JFK in New York, the FBI and CIA had actually met to discuss the bombing of USS Cole, which al-Madar was actually involved in. So the bombing of that military ship killed 17 US soldiers. The FBI had a picture of al-Madar that was taken at the summit in Malaysia. The agent asked the CIA if they knew who the man was, and the CIA refused to tell him. That's crazy. Or tell them, I should say. So it wouldn't be until August of 2001 that the CIA finally alerted the FBI about what was going on. But by that point, it was too late. Obviously, soon after that, September 11th happened. And so the theory is that the CIA operation spun out of control. However, the FBI had its own failures. So I want to go to the last video here, and then I'll give you more details. Oh, we don't have the last video. Okay, sorry about that. So again, the theory is that the CIA operation had spun out of control, but the FBI also, I want to be clear, had their own failures. So take a look at this. What you're looking at, when al-Hazmi and al-Madar were in California, they spent some time living with an FBI informant by the name of Abdu Sattar. Now, Carlson claims that somehow the FBI was never informed about this. Okay, so like there was definitely a breakdown in communication in some cases, but most of the time, my read of what was disclosed in this first episode was that the CIA was engaged in an operation that they were very much intentionally hiding from the FBI. And as a result of giving these two Al-Qaeda terrorists access to the United States with these visas, the ability to travel to the US, this was all an attempt to gather information, to use them as informants and gather information about Al-Qaeda. Obviously, that operation has backfired, but there's still so much that we don't know because there are documents that are being withheld from the American people, even though 9/11 happened 24 years ago. And at this point, I think we're deserving of a little more transparency and a little more clarity of how the largest terror attack on US soil was able to occur. Considering the fact that we have 1 billion intelligence agencies, you have all this, surveillance in America. So I thought that this was definitely an enlightening episode, to say the least. And there's more detail that you should look into. I can't get into every single minor detail that was covered in this episode, but I thought that this was telling. And I think that the CIA has a lot to answer for. Now, as it pertains to the 9/11 Commission, it was pretty much set up to fail. It was underfunded. And as you can tell, they were kind of led astray in that they weren't given all the information they needed from our own intelligence organizations. But it was an eye-opener, and I recommend taking a look at it. I'm not saying that, the United States intentionally planned a terror attack in the US and it was an inside job in that way. I'm just saying that there were some pretty big missteps and some really bad ideas carried out by the CIA, as it appears. And we haven't really gotten many answers about why this happened and why no one was held accountable for it. So take a look at the episode for yourselves. That's all I have to say about it. There are going to be several more episodes coming out in subsequent weeks, and I'll decide whether we cover every single one. But I thought this one contained some information that was worth knowing about. All right, we got to take a break. When we come back, Wosny Lambre joins us for the second hour.
Every day, the Young Turks delivers 2 hours of solid, fact-based, timely news and progressive commentary on all the day's most important stories. We keep our viewers informed while also providing perspective and insight on the news we cover, so you understand not only what's happening, but also what's happening behind the scenes, the stories behind the stories.
We play musical chairs and put these children in one awful detention facility to the next. That's what's happening at the border.
The things that got him banned, he's still spreading. So presumably, I think it's reasonable to say that if you allow him back on the website, he's going to do it again.
Any legal voter that we deem not willing to vote for my side shouldn't vote because it'll replace me that's supposed to vote for my side. That's not how voting works. That's not how democracy works.
And while many people following today's political news can get discouraged about the direction of the nation and the world, that's not us. At TYT, we're genuinely optimistic about the future, and with good reason. Today, wide majorities of Americans agree with our progressive stances on issues ranging from healthcare and education to climate, immigration, and wages. The rising generation of young people are also overwhelmingly progressive in their political beliefs and policy objectives, and they're increasingly flexing their muscle as voters and activists to demand change from our elected officials. The traditional mainstream media is mostly AWOL. They, along with the government and many other cherished institutions, have been captured by corporate interests. Audiences sense that they're not getting the whole story or even the truth from once trusted outlets, whether broadcasting cable TV news networks or national newspapers and magazines. The antidote is the Young Turks. Unlike mainstream corporate outlets, we're not beholden to corporate advertisers, to defense contractors, to Wall Street, or to Big Pharma, and we don't carry water for the Republican or Democratic parties. So watch us Monday to Friday at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific, and join the thousands of progressives around the globe who tune in every day for TYT's unmatched, award-winning content and see what it's like to experience a news organization that only answers to you.
Indisputable, exclusive, disputable, exclusive. We brought you this first. No other news agency has this video. No other news agency has this story.
Every week on Indisputable, we do original, exclusive, investigative reporting you'll find nowhere else.
Our reports have been viewed by millions. Hosted by Sean King, Ben Crump, Senator John Ossoff.
You, through your investigative reporting, unearthed very troubling allegations about specific forms of abuse and discrimination in the federal prison system.
We catching these cases on camera. Just imagine the things that we don't see.
Our groundbreaking investigations and exclusive interviews bring you the real voices no one else wants you to hear. We tell the stories.
Imagine a prison that is so racist, the corrections officers contact me. That is a life or death situation being created. A black woman who was driving for Uber was allegedly assaulted by a white male passenger. After we got involved, roughly 24 hours later, the police all of a sudden opened up an investigation. What was going through your mind when bullets were simply flying inside of your vehicle?
Honestly, I thought I was going to die.
Did these officers ever say that you fit the description of somebody they were looking for? Did they say that?
Never.
Okay, that means they lied.
And we want you to be part of our truth-telling movement. Send pictures and video of stories no one else is telling and a 1 or 2 paragraph summary of the story to Indisputable's exclusive tip line at indvideos@tyt.com.
If you have more information about what's happening at this particular facility, please let me know.
Together, we're challenging the system, and together, we're making a difference.
I have the entire background to this story, and it is going to make your blood boil.
Indisputable with Dr. Rashad Ritchie, unveiling the truth, empowering the people. Weekdays at 2:30 p.m. Eastern, 11:30 a.m. Pacific.
Welcome back to TYT. Anna Kasparian and Wosny Lombre with you. Big talent over at The Ringer. You should check it out. How you doing, Woz?
Doing fantastic. Happy to be back on with you guys as always.
We've got a lot of foreign policy in the news today. So I wanted to start off with a discussion about Trump shenanigans over at the United Nations Assembly in New York this morning. Let's get into it.
What is the purpose of the United Nations? The UN has such tremendous potential. I've always said it. It has such tremendous, tremendous potential, but it's not even coming close to living up to that potential. For the most part, at least for now, all they seem to do is write a really strongly worded letter and then never follow that letter up.
That might have to do with the fact that the UN Security Council is constantly, castrated by the United States vetoing their votes on anything wanting to hold Israel accountable for the genocide they're carrying out in Gaza. But I digress. This morning, President Donald Trump savaged the United Nations at the United Nations Assembly in New York. He questioned the point of the UN and even tore into European countries for their immigration policies. So just to be clear, the president of the United States is under the impression that the US can aid and abet Israel in destabilizing Muslim and Arab countries in the Middle East and in Africa, and then essentially lead to a massive refugee crisis, which ends up getting absorbed by Europe. And then we go ahead and we mock Europe about it. Okay, great. So for the sake of time, though, we're going to focus on one part of Trump's speech in particular, because early on in the speech, Trump lied for Israel like a good boy and essentially blamed Hamas for rejecting ceasefire deals when we all know that's not actually the case.
As everyone knows, I have also been deeply engaged in seeking a ceasefire in Gaza. Have to get that done. Have to get it done. Unfortunately, Hamas has repeatedly rejected reasonable offers to make peace. We can't forget October 7th, can we?
I mean, that's all we hear about from the United States government and from Israel, even though tens of thousands of innocent Palestinians have been slaughtered in the last nearly, 2 years? But okay, no one's forgotten about October 7th. But can we maybe spare a moment or two and think about all the innocent kids that have been slaughtered in Gaza? Maybe spare a minute or two to talk a little bit about all the various countries that have been bombed and airstriked by Israel. I mean, they're starting up a war in Lebanon right now as we speak. They're occupying Lebanon, southern Lebanon specifically. They've freaking bombed Tunisia. But the belligerent Israeli government can do whatever it wants. Okay, so Woz, the idea that Hamas has rejected ceasefire deals is particularly infuriating when again and again they do accept the ceasefire deals under Israel's terms. And then Israel's like, just kidding. And if you don't believe me, get a load of Matthew Miller, the former State Department spokesperson under the Biden administration.
The US basically accepted the Israeli notion of that we will not put any deal on the table that will end the war.
The prime minister wouldn't agree to it because frankly, we had spent the last few months seeing the government of Israel at times try and sabotage an approach to get to a ceasefire. They were always looking for ways to add conditions or make the terms more difficult.
Will it be true to say that you wanted a deal, a hostage deal, more than Israel?
I believe that's true.
So I want to be clear. Prior to Matthew Miller leaving the federal government, because Biden's term had ended, Matthew Miller was regurgitating the same lies that we're hearing from Donald Trump. So don't make a mistake to think, oh, Matthew Miller is a good guy. No, he was lying to our faces during the Biden administration about the very same thing. So Woz, I want to bring you in because when we talk about the uniparty, this is what people refer to. I get that there are some slight differences between the two parties as it pertains to social issues. But when it comes to war, when it comes to doing whatever Israel wants, both parties are complicit. There's no question. What do you think?
I mean, I don't see how you could say it's any differently when you look at the continuity between the Biden and the Trump administrations, particularly as it pertains to the war in Gaza. Right down to them leaking to Politico and Axios, like, oh, Netanyahu did this thing that we're so pissed about, but are gonna do nothing about to change the outcomes. Like, it's literally a perfect continuity from one administration to the next. And how you know it's uniparty crap is that just look at the opinion polls. Like, about 70% of Americans are opposed to our government support of Israel's ongoing war and genocide out in the Gaza Strip. And yet absolutely nothing gets done. I mean, like, it's just laughable to pretend that this is a Hamas thing at this point when they've carried on, when the Israelis have carried on their war for 2 years. They've more than extracted their pound of flesh. They freaking raised the place to the ground. They're assassinating peace talk leaders, okay, in places like Iran and Qatar and all of these other places. And this idea that they're the ones that are seeking to end the war and bring the hostages home is silly. And again, even when Trump got his first ceasefire deal, and there were supposed to be multiple phases to the ceasefire, we got phase 1. Benjamin Netanyahu wasted no time going in public. He was saying this in public. We're not gonna follow through on it. Like, the prime minister said this. You can go look it up back in January. So, like, it's just laughable to think that this is anything other than what the Israelis obviously want.
And there has been a very intentional effort by the Israeli government. It's nothing new. It's been going on for a long time to essentially discredit the UN, because the UN Security Council has consistently voted in trying to pressure Israel to stop, slaughtering innocent people. And it's always the United States that vetoes that vote. It just happened again recently, which is so loathsome and makes America look so terrible, right? You have the entire international community in agreement about what's going on and how Israel needs to be stopped. But the US is fully captured by the Israeli government. And it's beyond unfair to the American people, because at this point, the majority of American people do not support what's going on in Gaza. And look, more importantly, guys, I want you to take a step back. Even if I can't imagine that we have people watching the show right now that doesn't care about the innocent lives lost in Gaza, but even if you find yourself in that position, and I'll do my best not to judge you. Okay, the US is bankrolling everything that Israel's doing. They have bombed so many countries. They're on a multi-front war right now. They're trying to get the Lebanese government to disarm Hezbollah. And in the meantime, they're occupying southern Lebanon. And I mean, they just killed 4 American citizens in Lebanon. That was a story that broke yesterday. It got no attention. There were some publications that wrote about it. 4 American citizens, 3 of them were children. And you want to know what the State Department said? State Department denies that they're American citizens. Oh, you want me to believe the US State Department that's run by Marco Rubio that just doesn't even see these people as human when it comes to what Israel wants to carry out? Like, the same State Department that has considered violating the rights of American citizens who protest what Israel's doing. That State Department. And it's terrifying, because it just tells me that it doesn't matter if Israel assassinates literal American citizens. Our government doesn't even have our backs. There are American citizens who got killed in the West Bank. They went to go visit their family members in the West Bank, and they got killed by Israeli settlers, and nothing happened. Nothing. That's what our government is now. You think they care about us? They don't care about us. And that is a terrifying situation to find ourselves in, especially if you're vocally critical of Israel. All right, so during the speech at the UN General Assembly, Trump also chided other countries for, having some semblance of morality by recognizing a Palestinian state. Here's the clip.
Now, as if to encourage continued conflict, some of this body is seeking to unilaterally recognize a Palestinian state. The rewards would be too great for Hamas terrorists for their atrocities. This would be a reward for these horrible atrocities, including October 7th, even while they refuse to release the hostages or accept a ceasefire. Instead of giving to Hamas and giving so much, because they've taken so much, they have taken so much. This could have been solved so long ago. But instead of giving in to Hamas's ransom demands, those who want peace should be united with one message: release the hostages now. Just release the hostages now.
I want to be very clear. Israel, meaning the Israeli government, not the people, because the people have been protesting. They do care about the hostages. The government of Israel doesn't care about the hostages. And I find it hard to believe that there are still 20 living Israeli hostages in Gaza. Don't pretend like this is about the hostages. Israel has bombed several other countries that have nothing to do with Hamas. They're annexing the West Bank, has nothing to do with Hamas. It's just lies. And it's so sick to use those hostages as pawns to justify this ongoing slaughter. Yesterday, France, Luxembourg, Andorra, Malta, Monaco, and San Marino recognized Palestine as a state at the UN. The UK, Portugal, Canada, and Australia did the same on Sunday. Look, obviously, this is mostly symbolic. But it sucks, Waz, that it had to take this much slaughter for the international community to finally speak up.
Yeah, I mean, it's gotten to be so obvious. And, if you remember back in November of 2023, December, January of 24, places like New York Times and the Atlantic and CNN and the BBC, like they were running interference for what became so obvious from the beginning was not some effort to quash the quote unquote threat from Hamas. There was no operational coherence. It was just obvious that they were just out for blood and we're gonna carry out a brutal retaliation, a war of collective punishment against the Palestinian people. And very early on in those days, every single mainstream media outlet was running interference and running cover for the Israeli regime and the IDF and their horrible actions. It's just because there's just no justification. You cannot say that Israel, the country, and its safety is under some grave, imminent threat from a bunch of dudes hiding in tunnels in Hamas who have to carry out these guerrilla attacks when they do on IDF soldiers in Gaza, on the Gaza Strip. Like this idea that this ragtag group of militants could somehow pose an actual threat to the overall security is it's no longer a military operation. There are no military goals being achieved here. It's just, clearing out a city, demolishing a school, a hospital, a recreational center, a museum. That's it. That's all they're up to, is just straight demolition.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, the entire Gaza Strip has been leveled at this point. Gaza City is the last area, and you see videos, they're just demolishing high-rise residential buildings. It's so disgusting. I'm gonna leave you with this, because on Sunday, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu also stated this. They say it out loud, guys. So don't let anyone gaslight you and tell you otherwise. Netanyahu said, a Palestinian state will not be established west of the Jordan River. For years, I have prevented the establishment of this terrorist state, facing tremendous pressures at home and abroad. He just defames every Palestinian as a terrorist, denies them the right to self-determination. This is who Netanyahu has been from the very beginning. The founding charter for the Likud party specifically, it specifies that the goal for the party is to pursue the Greater Israel Project. There's no room for Palestine in the Greater Israel Project. And all of those surrounding Arab countries with governments that are essentially deferential to Israel at the moment. I mean, Israel's been bombing your country too. You're gonna sit there and take it. It's amazing. But Lebanon, go ahead and disarm Hezbollah. See how that works out for you. I'm sure Israel will play nice, just like they have in the past. Anyway, our government embarrasses me, honestly. And obviously, this issue has been dealt with poorly by both political parties. It made me sour on the Democratic Party entirely because of how Biden had handled the situation in Gaza. Obviously, Trump is no better. All right, we got to take a break. We're massively out of time. We'll be right back. All right, Pakistani American Nexus Gladiator, thank you for the generous super chat. Republicans and Democrats push a national day for Charlie Kirk, but John McCain, a respected man who survived 4 years of torture in the Vietnam War, never got one. Tell me again how the GOP honors its heroes. The hypocrisy is chef's kiss. Look, I'm just gonna be honest with you. The National Day thing, I see it as largely an empty gesture, so I'm not bothered by it one way or the other, but I hear what you're saying. That's a good point. Pakistani American Nexus Gladiator also says, and what about the Proud Boys and neo-Nazi groups that are marching across red states and spreading hate speech with Confederate flags? Oh, I guess that's fine for Trump. Obviously, it's fine for Trump. But I haven't really heard much from the Proud Boys in a while, and that's a good thing. Hopefully it stays that way. Cecilia Locklear says, love TYT's truthfulness of current events happening with the regime. Keep up the fine work, everyone. Anna, you annihilate them in an effortless, classy way that leaves them speechless. Thank you. Callie Millie Mo says, proud to be a day one and seeing your growth into the wider media landscape, Anna. Also, Israel's unfettered access to anyone's phone at will allows them to easily assassinate the character of detractors. I'm sure they would love to do that with me, but I just love how boring my life is. So it's awesome. R. Stone says, who's to say with this broad declaration that people persevered as a democratic voter waiting in line as a domestic terrorist threat, at a minimum detained until polls close? You're not slick, Stephen Miller. Oh, I see what you're saying. Basically label someone a domestic terrorist and hold them or detain them until they can't vote. I mean, that's an interesting theory, but let's not give them any ideas. Pakistani American Nexus Gladiator also says, happy new Jewish year to Jews who reject Zionism. UN and 150 nations recognize Palestine. Netanyahu's divine right can't rewrite maps. May your conscience stay clearer than Israel's borders. Hashtag free Palestine. Let's go over to our members. SM says, I disagree with a lot with Anna, but none of those people are in the same world as her in terms of political knowledge and ability to read what's happening. She should take the show over. That's a little bit unfair. I don't want to trash my co-host. And even though I'm very upset with what Jillian did, I'm not gonna trash her or like accuse her of not being knowledgeable. I just think if you disagree with the political points I'm making, just engage in dialogue, engage in debate. When you walk away and you abandon the show, not only is it unprofessional and disrespectful to your co-hosts, it shows weakness, and you should be able to defend your political views. Welcome back to the show, everyone. Anna Kasparian, Wosny Lombre with you. And we're going to talk a little bit about corruption and what has happened with investigations into corruption under the Trump administration.
Tom, I want to give you a chance to address this article that came out over the weekend. And it was on our always reliable MSNBC. And they said that you took $50,000 in cash in a bag from an undercover FBI agent to help them win government contracts in Trump's second term.
Look, I did nothing criminal. I did nothing illegal.
Well, there you have Trump's border czar, Tom Homan, denying that he engaged in any type of corrupt act after a Washington Post expose accused him of just that. Last night on Fox News, he defended himself from some damning accusations that he took $50,000 from undercover federal agents. So we'll hear more of what actually wasn't really a denial in a moment. But before we do, you had an instant reaction to that, Woz. I want to know what you're thinking.
It's just what you said. He didn't deny taking the $50,000. He just said, "Oh, I didn't commit any crimes. Not that I didn't accept $50,000 in a brown paper bag." He says, "I haven't committed a single crime."
Okay, so the reporting indicates that he took the $50,000 in a kava bag. So I'm just trying to imagine like what preceded that moment, right? Like the person who allegedly bribed him went to kava, had themselves a good hummus bowl, enjoyed it, and then saved the bag to put the cash in, and then engage in this alleged corruption. Okay, so Tom Homan was recorded in September of 2024 accepting a bag with $50,000 in cash in an undercover FBI investigation. The cash payment, which was made inside a bag from the food chain Kava, grew out of a long-running counterintelligence investigation that had not been targeting Homan, according to the People. So that's interesting. So just to make sure you caught that, again, the interaction was apparently recorded on audio tape. So Homan's encounter with the undercover FBI agents led him to be investigated for potential bribery and other crimes after he apparently took the money and agreed to help the agents, who were posing as businessmen, secure future government contracts related to border security, the People said. But after Trump took office this year, the Justice Department officials shut that case down. And I think that's the bigger story here. It's not that I don't think Homan should be held accountable, but the root of the problem at this moment is the fact that the Trump administration doesn't want corruption to be investigated. They shut this investigation down. So they claim it was because of doubts about whether prosecutors could prove to a jury that Homan had agreed to do any specific act in exchange for the money, even though it was on camera, and also because he didn't hold an official government position at the time of the meeting with undercover agents. I actually think that second point has some merit to it. If you're not already working for the government, it is gonna be hard to prosecute you. Let's just keep it real, okay? So we gotta be honest and fair. One person familiar with the case said the evidence gathered had not met all the necessary elements of relevant federal crimes, while another contended that the case was effectively ended prematurely before such additional evidence could be gathered. So that's also a fair point. Now, FBI Director Kash Patel, who's just really good at his job, and Deputy AG Todd Blanche put out a statement on Saturday claiming that the incident was fully reviewed, nothing to see here, and that they found no credible evidence of any criminal wrongdoing. Okay, but obviously this does raise some questions about whether Trump's administration was just trying to shield one of their own from facing prosecution over potential bribery. And in this interview with Laura Ingraham, Homan really didn't deny that he took the money. All he said, or all he claimed, is that he didn't break the law and that he couldn't possibly be a criminal because he himself is part of law enforcement. I'm sorry, I can't keep a straight face when I repeat that ridiculous claim. Take a look.
Look, I did nothing criminal. I did nothing illegal. And there's hit piece after hit piece after hit piece. And I'm glad the FBI and DOJ came out and said that nothing illegal happened and nothing, no criminal activity. You're talking about a guy who spent 34 years enforcing the law. I mean, I left a very successful business that I ran to come back and work for a government again. I'm back on a government paycheck. Not only did I sacrifice my family sacrifices, I make sacrifices every day. I got more death threats than anybody. I got a security team around me, but guess what? My kids don't, my wife don't. I mean, I haven't lived with my wife in months because I don't want her to be here right now with all the threats. So after all the sacrifices, after serving my nation for all these years, they want to come on and dirty me up. And it's not going to end. There's a hit piece on me every 2 weeks. But keep coming, because you know what? Tom Homan isn't going anywhere. Tom Homan isn't shutting up. And Tom Homan's going to keep doing what he's doing, because working with President Trump's the greatest honor of my life. We're making this country safer again every day, and we're going to keep doing it.
Look, the thing that Tom Homan has working in his favor is that, like, when he gives these like rally speeches during these interviews, like, I know conservatives love it. It like really hypes them up. But like, I have to say, whether it's Tom Homan or Donald Trump talking about all of the sacrifices they made to be in the government, by all means, don't make any of those sacrifices. You don't have to be a government official. Like, you know, do you, boo? But come on, really? You haven't seen your wife in months because of threats? Come on. Okay, anyway. So obviously this does raise some questions about whether Trump's administration was just trying to shield one of their own. We're gonna get into a discussion about what's happened to basically law enforcement that is tasked with investigating corruption in government. Before we get to that though, thoughts from you, Waz?
Just a couple of things. One, when he says that he's making a sacrifice and he's taking a pay cut, he's basically offering up a justification as to why it might be possible that he's taking bribes. Like, you're literally laying out the foundation for, like, look, man, money's tighter now that I'm working for the government. A bribe would be that, like, it's all I'm hearing is like, yeah, this sounds like reasons people would come up with telling themselves why they should take bribes. Another thing that people need to understand is that in the courts, they've basically made it so that it's really hard to prosecute somebody for corruption.
Yeah.
Essentially, not only do you have to take the money, you have to follow through on the promise. So like, if you just take the money and run, and basically rip off the people that are trying to bribe you, that technically, Anna, doesn't count as corruption, which I think is just laughable.
Really? I think I disagree with you on that. Look, I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't take the money at all because I just have moral qualms about that.
Sure.
But I do think you need to prove quid pro quo. You need to prove that, you know, you were corrupted and influenced by.
But what if they tried and just didn't get it done? Like they just weren't
okay. So in that case, I mean, if the individual, if the government official tried to carry out the favor, yeah, they should definitely face charges and be prosecuted for that. So I agree with you on that. But if they like took the money and did nothing at all, didn't even try, I don't know if you can really prosecute over that.
And the last thing, because we did the story, I think it was me and John did a story where ICE is getting their brand new cars, like a new like paint job or whatever, or getting them wrapped.
Oh, thank God. I was really worried that they would.
ICE logos, like they wanted to look cooler.
Thank God.
And they spending millions of dollars with a contractor on this. Like that literally set a light bulb off for me, where this insane ICE budget, like they come out and say, oh no, this is because we're super serious about kicking 15 million out. Realistically, it's just a kickback program. That's all it is. All the detention centers, these cars, all of the sort of arm programming that comes with ICE, whether it be the cars and the customization or the detention centers, et cetera, et cetera. All of that is just more grift. A bunch of people who have connections to the Trump White House are gonna be getting kickbacks.
You're right about that, but I'm not too concerned because, Waz, you got to give the Doge staffers credit. I mean, they're cutting government waste, so I'm sure they're on it.
Yeah.
And look, we're not going to have too much time to get into the finer details of this story, but I think it's worth mentioning that it was just reported by Not Us that the Justice Department had 36 lawyers fighting corruption full time. Under Trump, that has been whittled down to just 2. The public integrity section is the latest casualty in the administration's attacks on Nixon-era good government reforms. Yeah, tackling corruption, unsurprisingly, not a priority for the Trump administration.
You would think they'd want to at least, at the very least, sick those 36 lawyers on Democrat corruption, at least. But I guess not.
Yeah, I guess not. And by the way, I don't care, Democrat, Republican, if there's corruption happening, absolutely.
Get them out of here.
But no, I mean, get rid of all the lawyers, as many of the lawyers as we can, because ain't nothing more corrupt than what we've been seeing in the Trump administration so far. So we got to take a break. When we come back, I want to talk a little bit about the slander, the absolute slander that Mamdani in New York City is still dealing with by members of his own party. We'll be right back. Emetib2 says, yeah, Waz is joining Anna. You both are fun to watch when doing the show together. I agree. I have fun doing the show with Waz. Anna, when you can get Waz giggling, he has the best laugh. I agree. Not to mention the funny responses. I don't know how you do it, Waz, because you can take like the most serious stories and not necessarily make them lighthearted, but at least offer some comedic relief instead of like pure anger, and we need that. We do need that.
I mean, so much of what goes on, even if it makes us angry, is just so patently ridiculous. And sometimes it just feels like we're living in a comedy sketch. It's kind of crazy.
Okay, this story broke about an escalator at the UN that we have to talk about in the bonus episode because Trump wants he wants an investigation. Okay, so if you're a member, tyt.com/join to become a member. If you already are, please stick around for the bonus episode because I want to start the bonus episode with that story. It's too funny. John Bogino says, you handled that situation as well as anyone could, Anna. I don't watch her take, but I'm sure that no one who works on that show deserves to have to endure a temper tantrum like that. I just thought it was unprofessional and unfair to the co-hosts. Doodle Dragon Imran says, hooray, Anna, wishing you and the TYT family all the best. Thank you for helping us understand the news on this 2-2 Tuesday. Knocks on, 2-2-2-2-2-2-2. That's like a thing that Middle Easterners do. Like, it's like knocking on wood. Anyway, thank you. Let's go to Don't Shoot, I'm the Goalkeeper. I don't see the Kirk-Israel connection at all either. This really does look like the work of just one random guy. I agree with you. I mean, there are some theories that he might have had an accomplice. I'm not completely disposing of that theory. I think, look, I hate that Kash Patel is the head of the FBI. I don't think he's doing a good job. And I want to have like a really thorough investigation into this, but I obviously fully agree with you. I don't think there's any indication that Israel assassinated Charlie Kirk. You can't be throwing out theories like that because it just makes anyone who is legitimately critical of Israel and they have receipts to back it up sound like they're part of like a kooky group of conspiracy theorists. And in this case, that conspiracy theory is, in my opinion, kooky. It has no evidence. Wind Spirit Feathers says, nice to see you, Anna, and I've always loved your crane background. Thank you. All right, let's see if we have any more super chats. Yes, in Liberty and Guns We Trust, if a member of the federal government ever says, I did nothing wrong, the default is they did something wrong, most likely worse than what's being told, and they're covering it up. In Liberty and Guns We Trust, I actually fully agree with you on that. And Lane Hamilton, we do have time. Lane Hamilton says, I'm worried for you because I sense the fury regarding Israel. I know how much it means, just a caring person. I have similar feelings toward Putin. Yeah, I mean, yesterday when I got home from Florida, Christian just wanted to chat and see how I'm doing. And he started asking me questions about Israel and Gaza, and I got super wound up. And he's like, I didn't want to upset you, but how could that story not upset you? It's just the injustice sickens me. I want to remind you all to check out the members only bonus episode right after the main show today. If you are a member, obviously you already have access to it. If you're not a member, tyt.com/join to become one. We're going to cover some funny news, including, a very important investigation that needs to be done on an escalator, according to the president. So just stick around for that. Anyway, let's get to our final story of the day.
It's not just his failure to condemn the phrase globalized intifada, which of course calls for the killing of Jewish people, but also many of his socialist policies, right? Like state-run grocery stores, his historic attack on law enforcement. Listen, I think he's a very impressive candidate, and I'm not taking that away from him, but my problem is that he's a socialist, and he should be in the Socialist Party, not in the Democratic Party.
Yesterday, Democratic Congressman Josh Gottheimer lied about New York City mayoral candidate Zohran Mamdani, who has, in fact, condemned the phrase globalized intifada. But honestly, that's not the real issue here, okay? The fact that he is not willing to be deferential to the needs and wants of a foreign government is the issue. And all of the various government officials and members of Congress who have been effectively bribed by the Israel lobby are captured by that foreign government. Josh Gottheimer happens to be one of them. In his political career, he has taken at least, man, that is a lot of money, over $2 million from the Israel lobby. This is from AIPAC Tracker. Now, according to Track AIPAC, which uses that data from Open Secrets, which you could look up yourself, again, has taken over $2 million from pro-Israel individuals and organizations. And if you're wondering, wait a minute, did Mamdani condemn the phrase globalized intifada? He actually did, and that came in the form of an interview earlier this month. Take a look.
Words have consequences, and sometimes we need to examine our own positions to build unity. Has your personal views on the phrase of global intifada changed since you've been running for mayor? Do you understand those that see it in a more threatening way than saying, I'm just not going to police other people's language?
Yes, they have. And when we won the primary election, I said on that stage that I know that millions of New Yorkers care deeply about what happens in Israel and Palestine, and I'm one of those New Yorkers. And I commit to reaching even further to understand disagreement. In the meetings that I have had since that moment, I've met with Jewish elected officials, with rabbis, with community leaders, and there was one rabbi that spoke to me about how that phrase, for her, brought back memories of bus bombings in Haifa, of restaurant attacks in Jerusalem. And so I have said, after having that conversation, that this is language I would discourage.
I love that. I mean, to me, that's the sign of an actual leader, someone who's willing to engage in dialogue and change their mind, right? And I understand why he initially didn't, because it doesn't automatically mean that you're looking to engage in violent political action. But I don't know, there's been a lot of condemnation in regard to frittatas, and it's a little bit unfair. I think to the Spanish people who came up with that cuisine, I don't know.
Infatadas is one of my favorite dishes known to man. The infatada is just so delicious every morning. I think he's smart.
Yes.
Quote unquote moderate on this.
Yes, I agree.
Ultimately, what are we talking about? We are literally talking about language here. He's not moderating his stance on the depravity of the war that Israel is carrying out on the civilian population of Gaza. He's not moderating on his stance that Benjamin Netanyahu is a war criminal. He's just like, I think we could come up with probably some better phrasing to get our point across. And I think that's completely imbalanced. And I know some certain people jumped out the window. It's like, oh, see, look, they've gotten to him already. I'm like, guys, like, you can't be serious.
No,
if this
I'm sorry.
As some kind of reversal or backtrack to you. You're insane.
I totally agree with you. I saw the condemnation that Mamdani was dealing with from those people, but those are the types of people who are looking for any reason to doubt him anyway. They were looking for any reason to like prove that they're more pure than Mamdani is, an ideology. It's just like, I just ignore those people wholeheartedly. And look, I'm not gonna lie. I mean, I don't know where you stand on this, but living in LA and dealing with some of the crime issues that really blew up in 2001, they've gotten better since. I was worried about his stance on policing. I really was, because when we in LA cut the police budget by 150 million, that was pretty disastrous because it led to a severe shortage of LAPD deputies in a city that was already like with far fewer sworn officers per capita compared to other big cities. And so now we have this big issue where we're having trouble recruiting cops. When you call the cops or call 911 for help, it'll take forever for police to show up. Sometimes they don't show up at all if they don't think that the issue is enough of an emergency. And so he moderated his views on that as well. And that immediately made me respect him more because he's like, look, this is what I think we should do. I'm not looking to cut the number of sworn officers, but what I do want to do is hire mental health professionals who work alongside the cops. That, in my opinion, is a far better model because there are calls that police respond to that they're not necessarily the best suited for, but those calls could have like a situation where someone's having a mental health episode and does pose a physical threat to a mental health professional, and they're gonna have to call the cops anyway. And that's happened in LA, and I know that because of my best friend. She works as a social worker. She actually told me about that. And so it makes more sense to add, not to subtract from public services. That's the way I see it. Now let's move on to others. And look, I'm gonna say one other thing about Gottheimer and typical corporate Democrats. I think at this point, they're actually doing Mamdani a favor.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Yeah,
Yes.
tell me.
It's such a sharp contrast. And I think, and I've seen the point be made before, I do think this is a Tea Party moment for the Democrats where the Zorans they're going to be cutting to the heart of what the actual base wants. And these corporatized, centrist, stand for nothing, no actual constituency anywhere in this country. They're doing themselves, they're accelerating their demise by opposing this guy who so clearly is loved by your party's own base.
Yeah, that's such a good point. So, even
this
at
is
this
Eric Cantor all over again.
No, don't say Eric Cantor. Come on. Wait, did Eric Cantor, he wasn't against the Tea Party. He was very much in favor of the Tea Party.
No, he was like he was definitely a corporatized kind of,
That's right.
I'm not really into the tactics and blah, blah, blah. And then he got his ass up out of here.
That's right. That's right. And look, Chuck Schumer, Senate Minority Leader, still refuses to endorse Mamdani.
His days are number 2.
And you know what? I say good. I think your endorsement is actually going to hurt him, not help him. It is what it is.
I think when somebody opposes him finally, Anna, they're gonna point this out as like how out of touch this clown is.
Likely. All right, bonus episode is next. We'll see you there.